She slammed the front door so hard that one of the picture frames fell off the wall. That was her goodbye for the night. No kiss, no glance, not even a sarcastic "don't wait up." Just the sound of her heels clacking down the driveway like a countdown. I stood in the hallway, staring at the frame on the floor. It was the one from our second anniversary. Her in a yellow sundress, me with a dumb, lovesick smile, the two of us holding hands like we knew where we were headed. I picked it up, not to save it, but to shove it into the drawer where we kept all the other things we pretended still mattered. She told me 3 days ago about the party. Said it as casually as telling me she had a dentist appointment. "It's at Evan's place," she said, scrolling her phone. I laughed. She didn't. "It's just a party, Irving. Chill." I didn't say anything. I learned a long time ago that arguing with Callie was like wrestling with fog. You just get tired, and nothing moves. But she knew what she was doing. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to spiral, to blow up so she could play the victim. I didn't give her that. I just nodded and went back to folding laundry like she hadn't just told me she was spending her Saturday night in the house of the guy who once bragged about ruining girls like hobbies. But here's what she didn't know. While she was planning her little performance, I was already setting the stage for my exit. I didn't need fireworks. I didn't need revenge. I needed clarity. And nothing clears the fog faster than being left behind on purpose. She left at 7:49 p.m. I locked the door behind her, not because I was protecting the house, but because I was sealing the moment. By 8:10, I was moving room to room, taking down every trace of a life I no longer believed in. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I was numb in the most peaceful, terrifying way possible. I took my ring off and left it on the bathroom sink. I packed a single bag, one suitcase. Not because I was going far, just because I wanted her to come home and feel the echo. She didn't text, didn't call, and I didn't track her. For once, I didn't want to know, because I knew enough already. And when she came home, dragging her purse like a trophy and kicking off her heels like she'd won some battle, I made sure what she found inside wasn't anger or spite. It was silence. A drawer emptied, a ring, and a letter. When Callie finally staggered through the door at 5:42 a.m., I was sitting on the couch, not because I was waiting for her, but because I wanted to watch the exact second her face changed. And it did. Instantly. The moment she saw the half-empty living room, her keys slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a pathetic little clink. She blinked at the suitcase by the door, then at the missing photo frames, then at the bare spot on the wall where our wedding picture used to hang. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out, like her brain had unplugged from her tongue. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The silence did more damage than yelling ever could. She stumbled forward, mascara smudged from what I assumed was either sweat, crying, or too much fun, none of which I cared about at that point. "Irving, what is all this?" she whispered, voice suddenly tiny, nothing like the smug, victorious tone she'd left with the night before. I didn't answer. I just looked at her with the same expression she'd given me for years, a mixture of disappointment and exhaustion. But this time it wasn't an act. She reached for my hand, and I pulled it away. That shocked her more than the empty walls. She wasn't used to me denying her anything. She tried again, her voice cracking. "Irving, seriously, what's going on?" I finally stood up, walked past her, and picked up the ring I'd left on the bathroom counter. I held it between my fingers, not dramatically, just calmly, almost bored. "You went to your ex's house to spite me," I said quietly. "You wanted to hurt me. Congratulations, Callie. You succeeded." She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to reboot. "It wasn't. It's not. That's not why I went." Her voice tripped over itself, and for the first time in months, she sounded unsure. Not confident. Not powerful. Just cornered. "Then why turn off your location?" "My battery died. All night." Well, Irving, can we not do this right now?" She stepped closer again, but I backed up. The look on her face, genuine panic, was almost surreal. This was the woman who used to walk around like her decisions were carved into stone tablets. And now she looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. "Where were you?" I asked. "At the party. I told you. At his house," I corrected. She bit her lip. A nervous habit I hadn't seen since the early days of our marriage. And then she said it, the line that snapped the last thread holding me together. "It was just one night, Irving. Why are you being dramatic?" "Dramatic?" She called me dramatic. After disappearing to her ex's house for hours, dressed like she wanted a spotlight and an audience. I laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just defeated. And that scared her more than anything. She reached for the ring in my hand, and I closed my fist around it. "You don't get to touch this," I said softly. "Not right now. Maybe not ever again." Her eyes widened, and she finally noticed the folded letter on the dining table. She picked it up with shaking hands, but didn't open it. "Not yet." Instead, she asked, "Are you leaving me?" "No," I said. "You left first." She froze, confused, and then I added, "You just didn't notice yourself walking out." And with that, I grabbed my suitcase, not angrily, not dramatically, just decisively, and headed for the door. Her voice cracked behind me, begging, demanding, pleading all at once, but I didn't turn around. Because for the first time since our wedding day, I wasn't chasing her. I wasn't even trying to fix anything. I was simply done being the only one drowning while she splashed for fun. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even close it fast. I left it half open, because part of me wanted to hear what she'd do next. Would she chase after me? Would she scream? Would she finally show a shred of remorse that wasn't tangled in manipulation? But no, there was nothing. Just silence. And then, slowly, the sound of her sinking to the floor. I sat in the car for a few minutes, letting the engine idle in the cold morning air, the windows fogging up around me. My hands were trembling, not from anger or fear, just from the strange emptiness that comes when you stop clinging to a lie. I stared at our house, the one I'd painted, roofed, landscaped with my bare hands, wondering how many of those bricks were held up by my denial alone. Callie hadn't opened the letter yet. I knew that. She'd been too busy trying to grab at me, like my leaving was the only thing wrong in the picture. That was the thing about her. She never reacted to what she did, only to what I did in response. It wasn't the party. It wasn't Evan. It was the fact that I didn't shatter into pieces over it. That's what broke her. The letter. I had written it at 3 a.m., the night she left. I didn't plan to. I just sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and started writing. Not because I thought she'd read it, but because I needed to say everything without her interrupting, without the eye rolls or the deflections or her weaponized silence. I told her about the nights I stared at her back in bed, wondering if she was dreaming of someone else. I wrote about the time I heard her laughing on the phone and how it made me jealous, not because of who she was talking to, but because she never laughed like that with me anymore. I reminded her of the night I sat in the emergency room alone after my panic attack, because she said she was too tired to come. And I asked one question, just one. When did I stop being enough for you? She would open that letter eventually. Maybe not right away, but she would. And when she did, the weight of it would hit her in a way no argument ever had. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. And if that truth burned, so be it. I didn't go to a friend's place. I didn't book a hotel. I drove to the old cabin my uncle left me in Vermont. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors, just a wood stove and the sound of trees creaking in the wind. I hadn't been there in years, but I remembered every board, every creaky floor panel, every drafty corner. It felt like hiding inside a memory that still respected me. I spent the first day in silence. Didn't look at my phone, didn't check email. I let the world shrink down to firewood and snowflakes. I needed the quiet to figure out who I was without her. I realized I hadn't done that in years. I'd lost myself trying to love someone who thought love was currency, something to be spent when convenient and hoarded when not. That night, around 11 p.m., the texts started pouring in. First it was, "Where are you?" Then, "Call me, please." Then the long ones, the emotional ones, the "you don't understand," and "it wasn't like that," and "you're being unfair." The desperation leaked through the screen. But I didn't reply. I read every word like someone flipping through the last pages of a book they've already decided to put down. She didn't apologize. Not once. Just deflection, panic, bargaining. She didn't even mention Evan. And that's when I realized she didn't think I'd actually leave. She thought I was still the Irving who would wait, who would forgive, who would fold under her tears. But that version of me was still sitting at the kitchen table in that house, holding his breath for her to come back and act like she loved him. I was someone else now. It was the fourth message that made my fingers curl around the phone tighter than I intended. Not because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. "I think you misunderstood everything," she wrote. Nothing happened at the party. I didn't even talk to him that much. It was just drinks. Don't throw away what we have over one dumb night. I stared at that line, don't throw away what we have, and almost laughed out loud. Like I was the one with scissors in my hands. Like she hadn't been holding a match to this marriage for the last year while I stood there with a bucket of water, begging her to stop lighting fires. What we had a relationship where she got to do whatever she wanted, and I got to be grateful she still came home. We had a marriage where I was the background character in her personal drama, the guy who paid bills, folded laundry, and got slowly erased with every passive-aggressive shrug. I didn't reply. I just set the phone face down and went outside. Snow had started to fall again. Thick, heavy flakes that didn't float. They dropped, like even the sky was too tired to carry them. I stood there in my boots and let the cold hit my face. It felt honest. Unlike her. But then came the voicemail. I wasn't going to listen. I almost deleted it. But the second I saw it was over 3 minutes long, my curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play and braced myself. Her voice was shaking. Not with sadness, at first, but with anger. She was furious I had left without a word. Furious I didn't explain myself. Furious I ambushed her with a letter, like she hadn't been throwing grenades for months. But then, halfway through, her voice cracked. And that's when she said something that chilled me more than the wind ever could. I didn't think you had it in you, she said. You're not like this. You're not the guy who leaves. You're the one who waits. The one who stays. The one who forgives. She was right. I was that guy. For too long. And she had built her whole sense of security around that. Around the fact that no matter how far she pushed, I'd be there, arms open, heart bleeding, mouth shut. But not this time. And then, right at the end of the voicemail, like she couldn't help herself, she let something slip. I didn't mean for things to go the way they did. It was just supposed to be a distraction. I didn't think he'd bring up the past. I didn't think he'd show me those photos. I froze. My breath clouded the air, and for a second, I thought I'd misheard her. But I hadn't. Photos? She didn't say what they were. She didn't need to. I knew Evan. He was the kind of guy who didn't delete anything, especially not things that made him feel powerful. He was a collector of attention, of secrets, of evidence. And if she saw photos at that party, photos she never expected, then something happened that night that went far deeper than flirting or dancing. She hadn't confessed, but she'd cracked. And in that crack, something dark slipped through. I walked back inside the cabin, phone still in my hand, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt since our first big fight years ago. That sick, slow churn of dread when you realize the truth is far worse than your suspicions. And for the first time since I left, I asked myself a new question. What if this wasn't just emotional neglect? What if this wasn't just cruelty? What if Callie had crossed a line she couldn't come back from, and was now terrified I might already know? I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, that one sentence from her voicemail replayed in my mind like a whisper I couldn't shut off. I didn't think he'd show me those photos. It wasn't just a slip, it was a rupture. And once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. You start reconstructing everything you thought you understood from a different angle. A darker one. I sat at the cabin's tiny wooden table, lit only by the orange flicker of the wood stove, and stared at my phone like it was radioactive. She hadn't called again. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she realized what she let slip. Or maybe she was still trying to come up with a new story that wouldn't crumble on impact. That was her pattern. She didn't lie outright. She edited reality, shaved off the inconvenient truths until it sounded reasonable enough to pass. But that one line, that wasn't edited. That was fear. Genuine, unpolished fear. I kept going over the night in my head. Her tone before she left. The effort she put into getting ready. The smirk. The way she looked me in the eyes and dared me to object. And then it hit me. What if it wasn't just about hurting me? What if she went to that party for something else entirely? What if she had already crossed that line and thought she could hide it forever, until Evan brought out something she never expected to resurface? I didn't know what those photos were, but I was starting to get a sick feeling in my gut that they weren't just old memories. They were leverage. By late morning, I cracked and texted someone I never thought I'd contact again. Nico, my old friend from before I met Callie. We hadn't talked in years, mostly because Callie said she didn't vibe with him. And at the time, I stupidly listened. But Nico always had a way of sniffing out the truth, and more importantly, he still lived near the city. I kept it short. Do you still have a connection for phone dumps or digital forensics? I think something's up with Callie's old backups. He replied within 5 minutes. I'll ask around. What happened? I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't even sure what to say. By noon, Callie broke the silence. She sent a string of messages, the tone swinging wildly from guilt to aggression. First it was, please just tell me where you are. I'm losing my mind. Then, I told you nothing happened. I'm allowed to go to a party, Irving. You're making this bigger than it is. Then finally, if you don't respond soon, I'm going to show up at your parents'. I mean it. She was spiraling, but it was her final message that sent a chill down my spine. You have to understand, Evan was trying to mess with me. He showed me pictures, but they were old. Old. From years ago. They don't mean anything now. It was before us. Don't do something crazy over nothing. Except that wasn't what she said in the voicemail. In the voicemail, she didn't call them old. She called them something she didn't expect. And now she was doing damage control. Fast. Sloppy. That's when I knew for sure. Those photos weren't ancient history. They weren't harmless. And more importantly, she never said she didn't send them. Just that she didn't expect to see them again. The weight of that realization nearly knocked the breath out of me. It wasn't just that she had history with Evan. I knew that. It was that she still had ties to him. Maybe digital. Maybe worse. And now, he had played his hand. And she was terrified I'd find out what else he still had. I looked out the window at the thick blanket of snow swallowing the path out of the woods. And right then, I knew something was coming. Not just the truth, but the storm that comes when someone realizes their secrets are starting to breathe without them. And for the first time since I left, I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. By the next morning, Nico had answers. I heard his voice before I saw his face. He FaceTimed me, barely giving me time to brace for what was coming. Man, he said immediately. No greeting, no small talk, just that single word coded in disbelief. You were right not to go back. That alone made my stomach turn. He'd seen something. Something I hadn't. Something Callie hoped I never would. He leaned closer to the screen, rubbing his face like he didn't even want to say it. So I had my buddy pull whatever he could from old iCloud backups and a deleted drive that she apparently didn't wipe right. Took a few hours, but we got in. He paused. Irving, some of the stuff in there. It wasn't just photos. It was videos, voice memos, notes, screenshots of texts. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I stayed quiet, waiting. He went on. Most of it's old. Like, yeah, probably before you two got serious. But not all of it. He tapped a few times off screen. There's this one folder, date stamped 2 years into your marriage. It's hidden inside a renamed zip archive. The title was some boring file name like Q4 Finances. Clever, right? But inside were 2 things. One was a voice memo between her and Evan. The other was, well, a photo of something I really wish I didn't see. I swallowed hard, my pulse thudding in my ears. What was in the photo? He didn't answer right away. That hesitation told me more than I wanted to know. Finally, he looked at me through the screen, eyes softening. It was her. In that red dress. Same one you told me she wore to the party. But it wasn't from this weekend, bro. It was from a year ago. She was at his house then too. Smiling. Glass of wine in one hand. Sitting on his lap. I didn't even feel my hand let go of the phone, but it slipped off my knee and hit the cabin floor with a dull thud. I just sat there. Numb. Of course. Of course this wasn't just one night. Of course Evan wasn't some irrelevant name from the past. He was part of her timeline. Quietly threaded through the parts of our marriage I thought were ours. Nico kept talking. The voice memo. I'm not going to play it for you unless you want it. But she said his name with a tone I've never heard her use with you. Like she missed him. Like she wanted him to say something she needed to hear. I didn't need to hear the rest. I didn't even need the audio. My own memory filled in the blanks. All the nights she worked late. All the cold silences after I tried to talk. All the time she was distant during holidays, birthdays, even our anniversary. It wasn't burnout. It wasn't marriage fatigue. It was him. He'd never left. He was just behind the curtain, waiting. What burned most wasn't the cheating itself. It was the casual way she'd rewritten our history to fit her comfort. She let me believe we were just drifting apart naturally. That I was the one who wasn't enough. That she was trying. She said those exact words to me 2 months ago. I'm still trying. But she wasn't. She had already handed parts of herself to someone else and expected me to stay on standby in case that plan didn't work out. My phone lit up again. Callie. Another call. I declined it. Then a text. I know you're hurt, but I didn't do what you think I did. Please don't let Evan twist this. He's trying to ruin us." I stared at that message, rereading it again and again. She was still lying, still clinging to the idea that if she kept talking, I'd eventually nod, forgive, forget. But you can't unsee a photo like that. You can't unhear the panic in her voicemail. And most importantly, you can't rebuild trust on a foundation that never existed. I turned my phone off completely. I didn't want the next message. I didn't care if she cried or screamed or begged, because none of that mattered now. Evan didn't ruin us. She did. I don't know how she found me. Maybe Nico slipped up. Maybe she guessed. Maybe some part of her just followed the trail of guilt straight to the one place I thought was mine. But around 4:20 in the afternoon, I heard tires crunching over the snow outside the cabin. I looked out the frosted window, expecting it to be a delivery truck or maybe a lost hiker looking for signal. But it wasn't. It was her, Callie, and she was crying before she even reached the door. I didn't move. I just stood there, still holding the fire poker in one hand, heart pounding like it already knew I wasn't ready for what she'd say. She knocked once, then twice more. Not angry, not demanding, just broken, like she wanted to collapse through the wood. "Irving, I know you're in there. Please." Her voice was raw, nothing like the confident, dismissive tone she'd used just days earlier. I drove all night. I didn't know where else to go. I opened the door, not because I forgave her, not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to see the truth in her eyes. I needed to know if even a sliver of what we had was ever real. She stood there in a coat too thin for the weather, hair matted from the drive, cheeks red from the wind, or crying. I couldn't tell. She looked smaller somehow, and when our eyes met, something shifted behind hers. Something that told me she knew I knew. "I didn't sleep with him," she blurted. "Not this time. I swear on everything, Irving. You have to believe me." I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside and let her in. She moved like a ghost, carefully, like the house might break under her weight. She took in the cabin, how stripped down it was. No pictures, no distractions, just truth and cold and space. Maybe for the first time in her life, Callie was in a place she couldn't control. She sat on the edge of the worn-out couch and pulled her hands into her sleeves. "I know about the photos," she said softly. "I know Nico helped you. I figured it out when I couldn't reach him either." She looked up. I didn't know Evan kept that stuff. I didn't even remember some of it until I saw them again. It was like watching someone else's life. That someone else was married to me, I finally said. My voice came out flat. Not angry, not loud, just final. She flinched. "I never meant for it to get this far. I swear, Irving, I don't even know anymore. I felt invisible, like nothing I did mattered." "Then you should have talked to me," I said. "Not him. I tried," she said quickly. "But you were always so calm, so quiet. You'd just absorb everything. You never pushed back. I started to think maybe you didn't even care anymore." That was her logic. Because I didn't yell or slam doors, I must not have felt anything. Because I stayed steady, she assumed I didn't hurt. But I did. Every damn day. "I wanted to feel wanted," she said, her voice cracking again. "That night, when I went to Evans, it was supposed to be petty. Just a stupid game. But when he showed me those photos, I realized I never deleted him. Not fully. Not from me." There it was. The line I'd waited for. The truth she'd buried under 1,000 excuses. I walked to the table and opened my bag. I pulled out a second letter. This one shorter, colder, but just as deliberate. I handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "Divorce papers," I said. "And signed. But they will be." She stared at them like they were written in a language she didn't understand. "You already filed? I started the day after you left for that party." Her lip trembled. "So that's it? After all this time?" "No," I said. "That's because of all this time. Because I've spent years watching you drift while I held the line. Because you kept calling it just one night, when it was actually 1,000 moments where you chose anyone but me." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she had nothing to say. No retort. No performance. Then came a knock at the door. We both turned. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked over, heart suddenly racing, and opened it cautiously. It was Nico. He looked from me to Callie and back again. Then he held up a USB drive. "Thought you might want to hear the full recording," he said. "There's more." Callie's face drained of all color. And just like that, I knew. I hadn't even heard it yet, but the panic in her eyes told me everything. There was something worse on that tape. something she never planned for me to find. I didn't play the recording right away. I left the USB on the table like a loaded gun between us. Callie couldn't stop glancing at it, her leg bouncing so hard the floorboards were starting to creak. Nico stood near the door, his hands in his jacket pockets, watching her like someone who'd seen too many fake tears to fall for them anymore. The air inside the cabin was tight, like it was holding its breath with me. Finally, I broke the silence. You want to say what's on it before I hit play? She looked at the drive like it might set itself on fire. Her mouth opened, but it took a second before any words came out. It's from the night of the party, she said slowly. He recorded me, without telling me. I nodded. Keep going. I was drunk, she said, eyes darting back to Nico. I didn't know he had a mic on. I said things I didn't mean. I still didn't touch the USB. I just crossed my arms and waited. I told him you didn't make me feel alive anymore, she continued, her voice cracking. I said you were safe, predictable, and I told him I wondered what would have happened if I'd stayed with him instead. It hit me, not like a slap, like a slow freeze, because I'd spent years trying to be the man she could count on, and now I was being punished for exactly that. Did you sleep with him? I asked again, not for vengeance, just for clarity. I needed to know where the cliff truly ended. She shook her head. No, I didn't. He tried, but I left. You have to believe me. Nico looked at me. He didn't say a word, but I could read it in his eyes. She was telling the truth. This time, I finally sat down. The weight of everything began to settle. The betrayal, the years of emotional starvation, the night she chose a man from her past just to see if she still mattered. You broke something in me, I said, not out of spite, just truth. But maybe it needed to break. She nodded slowly. I know. I see that now. And for the first time since it all started, I believed her. I stood up and looked out the window. The snow had stopped. The sky had cleared. The world looked still, untouched. I'm not signing the papers today, I said. She jerked her head toward me, hope flickering in her expression. But I'm also not coming home with you, I added. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I need time. I need to find myself again outside of this mess. Outside of you. She swallowed and nodded. Okay, I'll wait. However long it takes. I believed her again. Because for once, she wasn't trying to pull me. She wasn't begging or gaslighting or rewriting history. She was just sitting in her shame, quietly, letting me have space to breathe. Nico gave me a nod and stepped outside, giving us a moment alone. I looked at Callie and sighed. You know what hurts most? I would have done anything for you. All I wanted was to be your peace. She blinked tears away. I know, and I ruined it. But maybe peace starts with truth, even if it's ugly. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and let the cold air back in. She stood up to leave, but before she stepped outside, she turned and looked at me. Thank you, she said softly, for finally choosing yourself. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. As she walked away into the snow, something loosened in my chest. Not pain, not regret, relief. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fix someone else. I was finally healing me. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something better.